Okay, so the Caribbean just got a whole lot hotter, as if it could get any hotter with what we've seen over the last few months. But the U.S. Navy's rolling out the USS Gerald R. Ford. When a dozen other ships aren't enough, bring in a carrier strike group. That's how you flex. That's how you look strong by the pool. And that's what's happening right now. So the newest super carrier is going up against Venezuela in its backyard. And to me, it's not just there to drop off brochures. Hey guys, we're here. We're just doing a little tour of your coastline. No, this is serious business. And this shadow war is escalating to a point where we could see a hot conflict any day now. So we're talking a full-on pressure play against Maduro's crew, against that regime from the Trump administration. So it's definitely a drug interdiction gig. That's kind of the main part about it, striking those fentanyl vessels. But now looking at it, basically it's being called a straight up potential regime change bait with that USS Ford being there. That's a 100,000 ton beast, and it packs enough punch to rewrite the rules of the entire Caribbean area. So with warplanes on that thing, can turn the tide. I believe those F-18s are ready to go. They're on alert. They're ready to schwack and strike any Venezuelan target that comes up, and they can do it from almost 500 miles out. They can be closer if they want, but you can definitely execute those combat missions from 500 miles out while you're keeping that carrier safe from any sneaky weapons that may have been delivered, like S-300s or S-400s from Russia, which Intel is actually saying those could be in that country right now. That Venezuela is basically beefing up all of their different weapon stockpiles in the potential case that this goes hot. So in the video, we'll unpack the guts of the carrier, the hardware that makes it tick, and what Venezuela is actually throwing back. We'll also run through what you guys have come for, those hypothetical situations on how these skies could actually light up in the Caribbean, even more than what we've seen already. So to me right now, it's all about raw military muscle rolling into that area. So let's dive into this entire crazy scenario that could amount to a potential regime change in Venezuela. All right, so cracking open that floating airport, the USS Gerald R. Ford, it's like the hood of a hot rod, but this hot rod happens to have dozens of fighter jets inside of it. Who doesn't like that? If you don't like a hot rod that has fighter jets, that has AMRAAMs and AIM-9Xs, just right there under the hood, I don't know how to help you, but this ship is leading the charge. It's a Ford-class carrier, and it's built tough, so Lockheed Martin's shipyards commissioned it back in 2017, and she's a whopping 1,106 feet long. That's over 2 football fields for anybody keeping track, end to end, and it displaces 100,000 tons of water when it's fully loaded. That makes her the biggest warship that's afloat. The design's all about efficiency. It's got an angled flight deck for simultaneous launches and recoveries, and it's got a superstructure that is basically built for better airflow and better seamless flow through the actual ocean itself. It's got massive elevators that shuffle jets around like a pro valet. I mean, can you imagine one day you're working at a hotel, the next day you're the valet on the Ford? No big deal. The day before you were parking Porsches, now you're parking Hornets. Life is good. But under the hood of this thing are 2 A1B nuclear reactors, and that's advanced boiling water type reactors that pump out 700 megawatts of thermal energy. That's enough to push this massive floating airport to 30 knots plus, or about 35 miles per hour, with an unlimited range basically. As long as the crew's got enough food and enough motivation to keep getting these jets airborne, it can basically just continue forever. It doesn't have to do refueling stops for decades. Now the jets aren't running on nuclear energy yet, so those need jet fuel, but the actual carrier itself can actually operate for decades without any type of refueling. But the stars of this show are the aircraft operators and those that are getting the jets airborne, the maintainers, and those that are launching these things. So electromagnetic aircraft launch systems, or EMALS, those sling birds off the catapults in about a 150-foot shot, and they're doing that every single day, pretty much every minute of the day. And that's way smoother than the old steam setups that some of the older carriers have. The carrier air wing, that's Air Wing 8 on this carrier right now, the stars of those shows are the F-18 Super Hornets, and those do a ton of multi-role work. They've also got the EA-18G Growler, and those can jam enemy radars, and the E-2D Hawkeyes are on there for airborne command and control, and then MH-60R Seahawk helicopters for sub-hunting or pretty much any other mission that you could want. Dropping off special operators, no problem. That thing is a beast, and it's a workhorse to get all those jobs done. And it can actually launch 4 jets a minute when this thing is in surge mode, and then advanced arresting gear can snag landing speeds of up to about 150 miles per hour with pinpoint control, as long as the pilots are snagging the correct wire, as long as they're having a good day. But this carrier is engineered for endurance, ops, and it just continually operates around the clock. So it's basically Venezuela's worst nightmare, and it's currently very close to their coast. So that's probably making Maduro sweat a little bit as he sleeps. But let's shift gears to what the bite of this thing is, because you got to have teeth on a carrier, because a carrier without that is basically a fancy barge that's just hauling around beautiful, amazing aircraft. This thing's got to be able to strike and do its own protection. So the Ford doesn't just pack guns. Most of the escort boats have the guns, but likely there's a few tricks up the sleeve of that aircraft carrier just in case things got into that internet of any type of threats trying to come in and do a nice little buzz of that carrier, like we saw those F-16s do from Venezuela, and that's just a risky proposition at this point. But you've got F-35s that are in the area. Those can shred any type of threats coming in towards that carrier strike group. You got the F-18s that can fly DCA or defensive counter air, and those F-18s are slinging AIM-120 AMRAAMs, and they've also got AIM-9Xs. Those missiles can get up to about Mach 4, so you don't want to mess with the AMRAAM, you don't want to mess with the AIM-9X, and then those are all going to carry AGM-84, which are Harpoon anti-ship missiles. So if Venezuela tries to get their rusty fleet anywhere close to this carrier, AGM-84s are going to spear those boats. Those things can skim 50 feet off the waves, and they can nail targets about 70 miles away. And then don't forget the Growler. They've got AGM-88 HARM missiles. Those are high-speed anti-radiation missiles that can be used for homing in on radars up to about 70 miles away, which is just awesome because Venezuela has been said to have acquired some shiny new toys from Russia, China maybe even, and also Iran. So they've got the ability now to target certain assets in the Caribbean. So when it comes to targeting those assets, HARM missiles are the best friend of any aviator that's trying to do any type of SEAD, suppression of enemy air defenses. And then everything's tied together by that E-2D Hawkeye. It's got an ASA radar, so an active electronically scanned array. What, you thought you were going to get out of this video without getting some acronyms? Come on, who do you guys think I am? But the radar on that thing can spot threats of likely up to 200 nautical miles away, and they also can fly in semi-autonomous formation mode and then use Link 16 to pump out all the information to F-35s, to F-18s, to any type of aircraft in the area that are on that friendly network. They're basically going to see everything that the E-2D Hawkeye sees, and that's just awesome. And the E-2D Hawkeye is doing that without even breaking a sweat. That's what they do every single day. And then there's escorts out there around the carrier, like Arleigh Burke class destroyers that can launch Tomahawk cruise missiles. Those have a 1,000-pound warhead, and they can fly about 1,000 nautical miles away. They can go low and slow. They can follow just above the terrain, and then they can schwack their targets with precision. And the whole package, everybody is basically under the maestro of the Aegis combat system, and that's used for automated threat responses. Those can fire interceptors at incoming drones or incoming threats before the boss on the ship even sips his coffee for the day. These things are high level, and they protect the carrier like nothing else at this point. That Aegis combat system is what's tying it all together. But now let's flip the script a little bit. So what's staring back at the naval power from Venezuela, and what is Venezuela doing to counter the US's threats in the area? So Venezuela's military has about 200,000 troops that have been mobilized, a lot more lately, but aviation-wise, it's the Venezuelan Air Force, or the FAV, that's the true wild card. Core fighter for that, from what we're told, is the Su-30 Mk2 flanker. They're said to have 18 operational birds that they bought from Russia. Those are twin engine jets that can top out around 1,500 miles per hour. They're said to have a combat radius of 870 miles per hour, and they're supposedly armed with the R-77. Venezuela also is said to potentially have MiG-29s, and they do have F-16s as well, which they acquired from the US. The US was basically like, hey, we want a challenge if we ever have to go up against you. So here's some F-16s, good luck. I'm sure every F-35 pilot and every F-18 pilot is salivating right now to go up against these Su-30s or the F-16s. They're said to have about 15 MiG-29 Fulcrums, and those airframes, who knows how much maintenance has been done on those things, likely spotty maintenance. So they're basically not the biggest threat, in my opinion. They've also got trainer aircraft, which can be loaded out, but think of those as more of like a close air support type scenario. And basically it would just be whack-a-mole for the F-18s, taking down those things. Those things are called K-8s, and they're basically close air support or trainer aircraft. But then the air defenses, that's where things have really elevated for Venezuela at this point, because they see the writing on the wall. They see that everything is moving towards the Caribbean. They're not sure what the next move is going to be of the Navy, so their air defenses have been bolstered. They're said to have 12 batteries of S-300 VM. Those are surface-to-air missiles, and those are long-range surface-to-air missile systems from Russia that can supposedly target aircraft at 120 nautical miles away, and they can get extremely high, so they could basically target any fighter coming in towards the area if that radar system itself could actually see the fighter and if that radar system wasn't taken out beforehand. But those things can also be mobile, which makes them a little more nasty. Whenever you're going up against any type of surface threat that is mobile, now you don't know exactly where it is. And these radar operators could basically keep their radar off, turn it on last second, and then try to launch at any type of fighters going in and striking targets on the Venezuelan mainland. And again, maybe those have been upgraded as well. So S-400s, even S-500s. At this point, the US military basically has to plan for the fact that Venezuela is in cahoots with Russia, with China, and with Iran. They're basically like those guys you invite to the party that just make everybody a little bit depressed because all they talk about is their glory days. Venezuela's like, we used to be great, we used to be awesome, and they're just kind of annoying. But what comes along with that is they're attracting Russia and China, and that's giving them potentially more of an ability to have an even greater surface-to-air threat, which has to be honored when it comes to any type of strikes on the Venezuelan mainland. And you can bet any of the aviators, all of the naval forces in the area are prepping for the fact that they might have acquired advanced surface-to-air missiles from Russia and China. So now let's game this out with some potential situations that could go down in Venezuela. So let's say the Ford is holding, they're at about 25 knots, they're in international waters about 200 miles off the coast of Venezuela. Word filters down from the White House. Opposition's got momentum in Caracas. Maduro is teetering though, and now's our chance to strike the regime to take it down for good. But Maduro's not going down easy. He's going to dig his heels in, and he's going to be hunkered down with S-300s ringing the entire capital. But let's say the mission gets a green light for a suppression strike to clear lanes for any other assets that need to go in and strike Maduro or the regime themselves. E-2D Hawkeyes are going to start this with an orbit that starts to paint everything in the area. They're going to paint all the different weapon systems from Venezuela along the coast. Now the Ford is going to launch Super Hornets that are going to launch, and they're going to be tied in with Link 16 to those E-2D Hawkeyes, and they're going to go in low. They're going to be looking for the targets that are going to be pushed to them from the E-2D Hawkeyes, and they're going to be trying to avoid any type of radars from Venezuela themselves. And then the Growler will launch to try to jam those radars that are going to be pumping information to the S-300s. So now you've kind of got a lethal team. You've got the Aegis combat system that's tied into the E-2D Hawkeyes that are pushing the information to the Growlers, and the Growlers are finding those threats on the coastline, and they're basically targeting with their HARM missiles any of those radars that turn on. And that's going to plow a pathway for the F-18s to go in and use JDAMs to strike basically any targets that they want along the coast that are aligned with the Venezuelan regime. And then they'll basically just play whack-a-mole and work their way in towards the capital, potentially even taking down Maduro himself on the first wave when it comes to that strike package. In this case, all these different assets syncing up, likely the Su-30s are not going to launch out of Venezuela because those pilots don't have a death wish. Even if they could get airborne, they're going to get schwacked with AMRAAMs just a couple minutes after takeoff, maybe even as they're sitting on the ramp. So now you've got a situation with this strike package going in, the way has been cleared, the targets have been struck, no losses, and no Su-30s even turn a wheel to try to go up and compete with this massive amount of naval air power. Okay, now let's say for the second situation, the Ford has repositioned 150 miles off the coast. They're going to be out there in a defensive posture, protected by the other ships around them. B-52s are going to launch from Louisiana, and they're going to be the main bomber that's going to take the stage to do PSYOPs and to do other types of interdiction missions when it comes to striking targets in Venezuela. Think of them dropping hundreds of thousands of leaflets to tell the population of Venezuela that, hey, you've been under the thumb of this you-know-what for a long time, and now the U.S. is coming in to try to give your country the ability to stand up for yourselves. So the B-52s are going to roll in, do the PSYOPs, and then they'll be prepared to drop bombs on any type of targets that are along the coast or that are embedded in the deep jungle cover. They'll likely have these as pre-planned targets that have been pushed to them from certain assets like an X-BAT or even a Fury drone that has been doing CAPs, to have been doing combat air patrols. And while they're doing those air patrols, they could be doing intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And I know what you're thinking. It might be a little early for these assets to be intertwined into this combat package, but the sooner the better, in my opinion. And who knows, any day now, those assets that have been doing testing could be intertwined into these actual combat operations. So those operations would be going down with the B-52s, basically getting information from those assets like the XBAT, potentially seeing if there's any threats like the S-300 that could be trying to take down the B-52. And now in this case, if B-52s are seen flying in, Maduro's regime might get a little cocky. Let's say they launch MiG-29s and those MiG-29s are headed straight for the B-52s. Well, in this case, an XBAT. Let's say an XBAT is airborne and it's programmed with AI to target any incoming fighter jets that are harassing the B-52s. At this point, the XBAT is going to open up its weapons bays and it's going to unleash a salvo of AIM-120 missiles. Let's say a dozen of those coming off of 4 of these XBATs, and those MiG-29s are going to be schwacked. Those MiG-29s are going to fall to the earth as shredded metal, and they're going to be the first victims of the XBAT. Probably the first of many, since it seems like this XBAT is such a capable platform. And then you've got the Anduril Fury that's going to be up above, jamming any of the radars, basically taking over the job of the Growler, doing it on an even higher level since AI will be intertwined into that Anduril Fury. So now you've got the Anduril Fury teaming up with the XBAT, and now the B-52's pathway has been cleared. So now the B-52 can basically just ripple their way in, striking down targets until they get to the heart of the Maduro regime. And in this case, this is an unbeatable combination of these next level assets, these next gen assets, basically these high level drones that are going to now be doing the job of the Growler, doing the job of the strike package, and also doing the job of F-22s and F-35s. That's the high level capability of having these platforms ready to go and having them integrated into operations like this, protecting bombers, doing overwatch, protecting the carrier strike group, doing all the different things that 4th and 5th generation fighters used to do. Now you're intertwining these smart systems to make this an even more deadly and an even more lethal package. At this point, Maduro is going to realize that resistance is futile, and what I would expect would be a big white flag coming from Caracas as Maduro basically surrenders and seeks asylum in Russia. That's a plausible situation that we could see play out any day. And again, those next level systems are going to be able to sync up with the Aegis combat system. They'll sync up with Link 16, and they'll be pumping information to all the different human assets in the area. That's why I think we've got to fast track these programs and get them up into the battle space as fast as possible. And pulling off an operation like that, those drones up there doing work, that's going to leave everyone breathless. Even the 4th and 5th generation fighter pilots are going to be a little bit jealous, but they're also going to tip their hat because they're going to see how effective these systems can be. So there you go, guys. We got the Ford plowing its way into the Caribbean. Does this mean regime change? We don't know yet, but it's definitely a hard flex against Venezuela's patchwork of defenses. It's going to potentially test the missiles that have been delivered in from Russia and from China, and this could all be wrapped up into one nice little tightly packaged bow of regime change shakeup, but it's got the whole hemisphere right now with its eyes on this area. So I will keep you guys posted as things develop, as we see what the USS Ford does in the area, but basically the line is being drawn right now, and now all bets are off. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I'll keep you posted as this develops. Thanks so much for watching the video, guys. Really appreciate having you here. If you would, just go ahead and watch this video right here. That's the best compliment you can give the channel. It helps out the channel exponentially, and I would greatly appreciate it. So I'll see you on this video right here. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.